Arun Modi sir had asked a question from Synthesis of Yoga in Chapter 2. Sri Aurobindo says, Indian tradition asserts that this which is to be manifested is not a new term in human experience, but has been developed before and has even governed humanity in certain periods of its development. In any case, in order to be known, it must at one time have been partly developed.
Don't you see, Vani, that the quote is from is in the middle of something, and it's in the middle of a paragraph? This is not explained.
This which is to be manifested. Okay, sir.
That's the problem. But I couldn't, you kept saying this. I didn't follow. What is the this? The quote is taken out of context. Read the rest. It's okay. Read it.
And if since then nature has sunk back from her achievement, the reason must always be found in some unrealized harmony, some insufficiency of the intellectual and material basis to which she has now returned, some over specialization of the higher to the detriment of the lower existence. The question is Sri Aurobindo referring to Vedic or Vedantic periods here?
He's referring to the Vedantic period. It will come out very well in my talk tomorrow on synthesis. In the Vedic period, it was a synthetic or a holistic conception in which the divine was to come down into life. The whole Vedic sacrifice was to bring down divine powers into life. The Vedantic period, Vedanta shifted to a path of knowledge based on the conscious being, the Purusha. It sought only for the Purusha. It sought only, in other words, for the transcendent, for the silent self. It sought knowledge that would lead it to the transcendent divine away from life. And it accepted the Prakriti or the nature as Prakriti or as rather as Maya. In the Vedic period, there was no such division. It was a spirituality of life. In Vedanta, in the effort, the vigorous effort to reach the divine, it shunned the complexity and challenges of life in favor of the unmanifest. That led to great spiritual attainments. It also led to the impoverishment of life. In chapter 5, he explains that there's only one mode of yoga or one path that did not follow the Vedantic method. That was Tantra. Tantra recognized the divine power or the Shakti in life. It was a synthetic approach, or rather it wasn't synthetic. It embraced the other side of it, that the manifest energy of nature is also divine. It took one side. There are problems with that. We can discuss it tomorrow. So I think I've answered the question.
Yes, sir.
Other questions?
Mr. Swaminathan asks, while we consider whatever happens to us, it will be on account of Mother's grace, we are also encouraged to see whether there is any correspondence in us which cause the bad things particularly, either to us or to the people around us. Can you help me to reconcile and understand this? Do we need to see the correspondence in us which caused a positive scenario or good things?
The positive correspondence is when we cease to assert ourselves. We cease to be in the ego when we rely on Mother. The negative is when we insist on the nature. That's a simplistic statement. The negative things come in us, we can say because of bad things in us. We can generalize and say because we insist on the ego. The positive things come when we withdraw from the ego. It's true that in us, we have positive and negative characteristics. It's true. The positive characteristics are the characteristics that help us transcend the ego. The negative characteristics are that which divide us from other people and strengthen or assert the ego. See, his question leaves open the possibility that we praise people for their good qualities, which are also qualities of the ego. I'm trying to avoid that misconception. The good qualities are the qualities that help us to when we say goodness, the goodness is, we can say it's a good the goodness of the person is that in it which doesn't insist on its own assertion of the ego. When Mary King lets Frank go, we can say it's a very good quality in her. She's very virtuous. Her love is sincere. We can also say it's a quality of selflessness where she abandons all the values of her ego. So when we think in terms of ego, it'll be clearer than when we think in terms of good and bad qualities.
Swaminathan sir asks, does Sri Aurobindo mean free will as internal freedom? What drives our free will? Is our free will as pure as divine will?
See, he's taking the statement out of context.
So just wanted to add, there is a context to this, sir. I had shared a quote and he was asking in reference to the quote. So shall I read out the quote,
Please,
sir?
that'll be very helpful, Super. That's
So,
exactly, context is what's missing.
So let me read out the quote, sir. Just give me a second, sir. Yeah. So the quote was, the divine can lead, he does not drive. There is an internal freedom permitted to the divine leading. How else can any real spiritual evolution be done?
Can you read it again? Because I missed a word or two.
The divine can lead, he does not drive. There is an internal freedom permitted to the divine leading. How else can any real spiritual evolution be done? So it was in this context that he asked. So I had actually answered this. I said that he had asked, does Sri Aurobindo mean free will as an internal freedom? Can you provide clarity that what drives our free will and whether our free will is as pure as divine will? So I had said that here I think he's trying to say that the progress comes with free will and how we use it. The divine doesn't take control to drive us towards where we have to go. He simply leads. If we follow his lead, we go the sunlit path, and if we choose our will, we go through the difficult route. So I think the meaning of the message is to emphasize human choice. So that was my response, sir. I'm not sure. So we said we'll pose it to you, the questions.
Part of the problem is it's still not in context because even your statement is not in its full context. Even the statement you have quoted is not in its full context in which he spoke.
Right, sir.
If it's in its full context, it'll be clearer. I can answer, but you see that why he says this, he says this in a context.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Somewhere I got this quote somewhere.
His statement is a removal from your context, and yours is a removal from Sri Aurobindo's context. And these are the kind of questions that come. When you go back to the real context, things will be clearer. I can answer it in a general way. What is the free will in us? We are the divine evolving in nature. That which calls from below is also the divine, or rather, that in the divine that can express through our nature personality. It is a relationship between the divine below and the divine above. The divine will is what we mean by the divine above, which is the fully enlightened supramental will. The divine below, or the will below rather, is the will of the ignorant divided being in ego, which has some expression of the emerging psychic in it, trying to express. The divine above doesn't crush the nature and impose itself. Each nature is to evolve in its own unique way to express some character of the divine. It learns from its experience. It's shaped by its experience. It's shaped by its swabhava. It's shaped by the spiritual individuality that's trying to emerge. There's an interaction between the two. Where the divine doesn't act, nature acts. Where we follow our own will rather than the divine will, life acts and gives us the consequences of our choice. Let's forget everybody else. The choice for us is, at each minute, do we really mean my will or thy will? Thy will meaning we want the will of the Supreme. My will means we follow our urge or our aspiration through our present personality. The mother doesn't impose on us the truth. She gives us the freedom of choice so we can learn, so that our personality can be shaped or purified by that experience. And what we get is the response to the character of our will coming to us from universal nature, which is also the divine. Tell me if it makes any sense, Suku.
Yes, sir. The context in which you're saying it is clear, sir. So, though we didn't understand it that way, but your explanation kind of gives it the dimension which we needed to think in.
You turn it on.
We did not relate it to the, the supreme power above, and we were just thinking about ourselves and the human aspect of
it. It's not us against the divine. It's the divine in the ignorance, or the soul in the ignorance, trying to relate to the divine being above in its gradual awakening. We're unconscious, we're divided. What comes to us from life is the divine coming to us through our ignorance. We call it Prakriti. We have a choice in Prakriti. We have a choice at every minute. Do we surrender our will to the divine and invoke the truth? Or do we assert the will of our personality and evoke the response of Prakriti, of nature? When we withdraw, we call it consecration. When we consecrate our will and ask Mother to act, her consciousness comes, and the response of life we get is a response to her consciousness from above, or our higher consciousness, you can say, rather than to the lower consciousness within which we're settling. We have the choice to follow the will of nature or to surrender it to the divine. That's the free choice. The animal doesn't have that choice because they're totally unconscious in nature. When I'm overcome by anger, I don't have a choice because I'm completely surrendered to nature. When I try to consecrate and I step back from my anger, and I surrender to Mother and say, Mother, your will, not my will, meaning you act, not let my character and nature and swabhava not act. Then the response comes to her consciousness in us. So that choice is there. Whether to surrender our nature or to surrender to our nature. We surrender to our nature and we identify with it, or we identify with our higher nature, which is the mother's consciousness. That choice we have. When we surrender to our nature, there's no real free will, because we're the slaves of universal nature, or we're the slaves of human nature. We're not free. But we have because nature is compelling us to be like everybody else, to be like everyone else. But we have that choice. The choice comes in surrender. If anyone would like a further clarification, it's a very fundamental point.
Sir, is that why, sir, we keep slipping back? Because by nature, all those things, like I think Vidya ma'am was referring to it yesterday. She was saying that by nature, we are programmed in such a way that we act out of instinct and all that. But when we are giving up our nature to the divine, it's then we are going and doing something which is different. And that's why we keep slipping. It's possible to slip, but this takes an effort that doesn't. That comes so naturally to us. Is that wise?
It comes so naturally because we're immersed in the nature and identified with it. Another way, we're identified with our ego. We really think our ego is ourself. It's not our true self. But we believe it is our true self.
Thank you, sir. That is very clear now.
Very clear. That's the choice. In other words, to simplify something that's become complicated, at every choice we have a choice whether to surrender, whether to consecrate, or to go by our own swabhava, which is in the ignorance. We do have that choice. The person who's totally ignorant doesn't have that choice. Theoretically, they have the choice, but they're helpless because the animal is unconscious. Let's say this, you have a choice only in the measure you're conscious. Consciousness is not a simple state. You're either conscious or unconscious. There's a whole gradation. So how can I be conscious? How can I consciously choose not to follow my character when I don't even know what my character is? When I don't know that I'm behaving in a way my father or grandfather behaved because that's what I inherited. How can I choose? This is me. I don't know there's a choice. To be conscious is to be conscious of the difference between the impulses of my nature or my character, whatever we call it, and the possibilities of mother. Man, sometime in his evolution, at every point he becomes aware he has a choice. The original choice is not, the original choice is to be good or bad, to be selfish or unselfish, fundamental values, to do what's good for everybody or do what's good for me, what I think is good for me, to share or to take everything for myself, to dominate or cooperate. We exercise a choice. Fundamentally, it's the choice whether to reinforce our ego in its struggle for survival or to aspire for spiritual growth. That's why Mother's simple formula, thy will or mine, thy will not mine, is fundamentally the point of free will. If we don't know that there's any other will, if we're not even conscious enough to know what our will is, we just act it. I say, common phrase, I don't know what happened. I became angry, I lost myself. When I lost myself, there's no question of choice. I succumbed to my nature. I was overtaken with greed or anger or sleep or inertia or laziness or fear. I ran away. I'm ashamed of myself. I ran away. I don't know what. When I saw the other soldiers coming, I just dropped my gun and ran away. I feel sorry now, but I never even thought of staying. They're wanting to kill me. I didn't know when I enlisted in the army that people will try to kill me. They're firing at me. Is that actual real cases of young people who joined Napoleon's army or whatever it is for the joy of heroism of serving the country. And when they got out there and found out people are actually shooting at them and the people next to them are dying, they didn't even think. They just dropped the things and ran away. It's a known experience in the military. I like the uniform. I don't like the idea of being killed. The girls look at me and admire me when I'm in the uniform. Everybody there admiring all the boys in uniform. I also wanted a uniform. I don't want to lose my arm and my leg or my head. So the key issue is there. The man, we have no words for it. At the lower levels of our consciousness, we have no free will. We're like the animal. In the enlightened levels of our consciousness, we have a choice and we can decide. In the highest levels of our consciousness, the right choice is very clear to us and we seek it and crave it. In the lower levels, the wrong choice is not only apparent to us, but it's emphatically insistent and we can't even think of not doing it. Gold, how can I not take it? Somebody dropped gold on the floor, how can I not pick it up and run away with it? There's no question. So the choice comes in the measure we're conscious. It's not a right or a yes or no answer. Now we get the formula. It's not a yes or no, do we have free will or not? It's a formula of according to the level of our consciousness, we have a free will. Even that will is very much limited by all of us, which is still unconscious, subconscious. We may have a mental free will, we can't persuade our body. I can persuade my mind to pray instead of taking the medicine, but my body will still reply only to the medicine because it's not conscious. It doesn't respond to the same way my mind does. So I think I have found a way to.
Thank you, sir. Beautiful clarification. Thank you.
Fundamental issue. Anyone else with a question?
Sir, I have a question.
Ah.
I've been trying to formulate this for a week now. I am not able to, so I'll just put it in a layman terms, however I could. Sir, last 1 year I've been trying to cook a lot because of COVID, out of desperation. So once I started cooking, I started liking it and I started to read more about it. The more I read about it, the more I found out newer scientific ways of cooking, like what kind of pans that we should use and waterless cooking, high pressure cooking, low flame cooking and things like that. So once I started digging deep into that, the kind of knowledge that I accumulated basically reflected that our traditional ways of cooking are not traditional as in the ways that we use in our home are kind of bad because they have a lot of nutrition loss in the process. So the more I read about it, the more research or the more knowledge I accumulate in this particular area. So now this gives me a question, okay, am I entirely relying on the research of some people or am I relying on the mother? So there is a doubt, or I am not able to reconcile these two things that, oh, I have to do research and learn and then do it, acquire the skill, or should I just believe whatever my mom cooks is good and just eat it? So I'm not able to reconcile these two. So I thought I'll just ask you what to do next.
You're at home with your family.
Yes, sir.
your question is, should I eat what my mother cooks, or should I try to get my mother to cook the way I want her to cook?
Another part of that is one part of the question. Another part of the question is, should I really research in the areas and gather knowledge of what is the right way of cooking these days, or like which is optimal way of cooking, so that nutrition is not lost in the food and things like that.
You're asking whether there's anything wrong with doing that research.
Yes, sir. Because it gives me a question, am I relying too much on the research, or am I relying too much on, or I'm not relying on the mother? So that's where the entire confusion arose.
See, there's two parts to this. Knowledge is good. What you do with the knowledge is another thing. As long as you understand that the knowledge that you get from reading about that, what you're essentially doing is reading about the Western scientific approach to nutrition. There is certainly a great deal of truth in it. It's not completely truth. There's a good deal of superstition in it. Say, I think Ashok was the one who told me a few days ago that if I'm not mistaken, somebody told me that the level of sugar in the blood that's considered diabetic, for which you should take medicine, for which the medical industry in the West has been pressing and prescribing for decades, they have suddenly discovered or decided that it's the wrong level, and they raised the limit, meaning a lot of people who are taking medicine need not. This is not just true for, see, the level that they tell you is an average level. It's an average of everybody. Try being, do you want to be like everybody in any respect? They have statistics. They're trying, it's a norm. What's true for the inactive person, overweight person, and the active, dynamic, young, healthy, vibrant person are not the same. Medicine deals with statistical averages because how else can you have a general knowledge that you can disseminate to people? Otherwise, you have to have a chart with 1,000 pages for blood pressure and for sugar, according to this, that, and everything else, whether you're married or not, whether you drink or smoke or whatever, how long you exercise every day. It'll be a different chart for the person who exercises once a week and 10 times a week, or for 10 minutes, or for 3 hours. It's all averages. Many of these things are driven in the West by the companies that are selling pharmaceuticals. And they're prescribing, like the anti-cholesterol drugs, it's a huge industry. And BP, huge industry, maybe the most profitable part of the pharmaceutical industry. So they conduct the tests in such a way that it shows, because statistics are completely manipulated according to how you construct the test and ignore the evidence that's contrary. So what I'm saying is, on one side, there's a truth in what they say. If you boil the vegetables the way, or cook the vegetables the way they're cooked in India, 3/4 or 9/10 of the nutrition may be lost. It's absolutely true. If you deep fry foods, it does have carcinogenic elements to it, is true. It's one element of a totality. The traditional Indian food had a great deal of knowledge into it, intuitive knowledge. You add the black tulsi leaves, like Tilagam is advising me, or anything. How much knowledge there is. What we are in Indian society today is, we are halfway abandoned all of the tradition and halfway accepted pizza and ice cream. We lost the benefits of our own tradition and took the least nutritious part of what the rest of the world does. We eat pizza and ice cream in the West, but we also steam our vegetables to minimize the damage to them and try to eliminate the deep frying as far as possible. So everything is relative. There was a very famous lady, Adele Davis. My wife's family was raised on what she wrote. She actually converted the whole diet into a medical, how much of each thing you should eat, how much vitamins you need, how much protein you need, and everything. At one point when we were married, she started giving me this diet. I had constant diarrhea and gas from following this diet. She was raised in her family by it, and they really made the kids eat like this. The lady finally, who told all the remedies for cancer and everything and all the things to avoid, she died of cancer at 65. It doesn't mean there's no truth, but we have to have the common sense of not taking all that we read as fully true. We have to, you cannot take anything as fully true. You cannot ignore anything as fully, if you refuse to have bottled water. A Westerner who comes here and says, no, I'm a free man, I can take food on the street from any street vendor, and I can take water from anybody who gives it. Once I went to Algiers when I was young. Just for one day, we went over on a ferry and came back. As I was walking along, a man with a goat came on, and just out of friendliness, he offered me some milk right from his goat. He milked the goat and gave it to me. Out of this act of friendliness by the man who's giving it free, wasn't for the free, but how to refuse this hospitality. The next day, my whole body broke out in spots and itching. There's a truth. Homogenization, pasteurization are truths. It wasn't true for him. He doesn't get itching and spots when he drinks the milk from the goat. He thought he's giving me something precious that he has. So everything is relative. What you can do, what you should do, what you should ask your mother to do is a whole different question. What you should try to impose on other people is a whole different question. The thing about diet is whatever works for us, we think the whole world should accept. And we become very intolerant about people who do so, oh, they don't know, they're doing it all. You can grow and learn by experience without getting carried away by fads. Either we're carried away by fads or we're carried away by preferences. The only advantage of reading the science is it teaches you to outgrow your preferences with the idea that you're doing something good. That capacity to reject your preferences is a good capacity. It doesn't mean what you're doing is really better. It means you have chosen the mind over the vital. You follow? When you do this, you're imposing the mind's will on the vital and the physical. It can be a torture for the body. Mother says the mind can be a tyrant over the body by imposing its understanding on it. So we have to take things in their relative thing. Take it in a balance. Try to find out a truth for you and your body. Don't throw it all away as nonsense, either tradition or Ravi has asked me to do that gargling oil, sesame oil, gingerly oil to help my throat. I have no idea why I should do it. But all the modern medicine didn't help me with my throat. So I tried. Okay, We can try. We can be open to the fact that there is great knowledge, traditional knowledge in the Indian tradition. I have no doubt about it. Which knowledge is applicable, which I should follow. I'm not an Indian. I'm not from this climate, and so forth and so on. We have to find our own way. That may not help you at all, but that's the best I can do.
No, sir, you gave a different perspective. I get what you explained.
Ashok, something on your mind? I know there's always something.
Yes, see, in this world of dualities where we are moving and making progress by overcoming opposing elements. When a man wants to be truthful, but he lives in a world of falsehood, so he progresses along lines of truth by defeating the false elements. Like that, there are always opposing combinations like truth and falsehood, defeat and success, defeat and failure, pain and pleasure, light and darkness, all that stuff. In this context, the word progress does make sense. But once we move into the supramental plane, where there is only the self-existent good and self-existent truth, there is nothing opposing. In that case, any talk of making progress, I think, becomes meaningless. Because you are not being opposed by anything. There is only the self-existent good, self-existent truth like that. So can we say once we move into the Gnostic plane, words like progress, setback, and these comparative terms lose all meaning?
A very good point, Bob. As you can concede that the ignorance is infinite, the divergences and variations from the truth are infinite. And we start with infinite ignorance, completely lost in the inconscient. And we gradually are emerging from that infinite ignorance towards a ray of light. And from that ray of light, it's gradually expanding out and out and out and revealing more and more of an infinite truth. Because there's a truth in everything. There's a truth in how we cook our food or how we drink our water or how we sleep or pray or anything else. So there's a point at which we cross from the ignorance to the knowledge. But the knowledge is also infinite. The splendors of the divine are far greater than the variations on the ignorance. You know, we have 7.5 billion people on Earth, and every one of them has a unique fingerprint, uniquely reflecting in some way their consciousness and character. In the truth, in the knowledge, there'll be an infinite number of fingerprints, symbolic of an infinite number of divine qualities and truths or expressions of truth. And the constant wonder of that exploration in truth, in light, in knowledge, we can also call progress. There's nothing wrong. The trip is not over. That he has very clearly said. He has said in the Mother, there are powers of the divine that haven't even manifest yet in the creation. They're waiting until the ignorance clears so they can come down. So the manifestation doesn't end, or the discovery doesn't end when we emerge from the ignorance. What we emerge from is the sense of division between ourselves and the divine, or the sense of identification with our ego. But the divine itself is infinite in its capacity for manifestation. Mother, describing her own experience and agenda, when she experiences for an hour the whole universe as waves of love. The whole universe can not only be seen as waves of love, it can be seen as waves of beauty, waves of ananda, waves of power, waves of light, waves of peace and silence, and so many things. And they're not only waves, it can be mountains, it can be flowers, it can be in endless colors and everything. There's no end to the adventure of consciousness. There is an end to the adventure of consciousness and the ignorance. Life Divine is really divided into that two parts. Book 2, the infinite consciousness and the ignorance, the knowledge and spiritual evolution. When we cross over from the ignorance to the knowledge, the adventure does not end. His phrase, the adventure of consciousness and joy, doesn't end. It's not like there's one joy, and once we attain it, we got the ultimate prize and we can retire. Or the soul will delight in the endless manifestation of the divine, because that's what the divine is doing. What the universe will be, we cannot imagine. What life will be, we cannot imagine. What the lower life will be, what our interaction with other people will be. Look, just take it this way, Bob. Mother and Sri Aurobindo are two realized souls, however you want to describe them. They are beings, call them whatever you wish. They are beings who did not live in the ignorance, you'll agree. Look at the uniqueness of their personalities. Look at the uniqueness of their roles in life. And Mother related to each other person in the ignorance, uniquely according to what she's trying to awaken in them. Supposing we're surrounded by, supposing a group of us cross over on that magic ship to the supramental world, each of us will still be unique. Each of us will be manifesting a unique attributes of an infinite divine consciousness. And each of us, in relating to each other person, will be uniquely having experience and creativity and adventure. The play will not end. It will be a play in light and truth and joy, rather than a play in darkness and ignorance. It will be life divine is not a life of, okay, we've made it to the top, now the Christian idea of heaven, whatever it is very shallow and very limited. It's a play of infinite delight, infinite in time and space and variety, and creating constantly new forms of delight. If Balzac or Trollope wrote so many novels about different varieties of ignorance, we'll be able to create an infinite number of varieties of human nature or divine nature expressing in life, in stories, adventures. Each will be unique, and they'll be as unlimited and varied as Shakespeare's plays or Trollope's novels. The story doesn't end. Only the darkness and suffering ends. It's a wonderful question. I hope it makes some sense. Otherwise,
human analogy, your argument for infinite improvement doesn't hold if I use a human analogy.
you use the word improvement. Once you cross the line, I use the word adventure, experience. Improvement is a qualitative term from worse to better. That's in the dualities. From suffering to pain. The duality of suffering and pain, success and failure, good and bad, those dualities end. Pain and pleasure end. But the scope for adventure, for variety, for self-expression, for creativity, that doesn't end. That is progress you can call it progress, or you call it adventure, to avoid the term. It's not an improvement in the moral sense, but it is a wonder of experience that will be more engaging than our experience has ever been. It will not be less fulfilling or than anything. It's not like we all just lie down on a golden sofa after that and retire from life. Life will become a divine dance and a divine play. You see, it's impossible for us to even imagine a divine life, because for us, life is filled with challenges, problems, narrow escapes, confrontations, and difficulties. What's life without it? Our definition of life is a life of dualities. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. Sometimes we succeed, sometimes we fail. Some things we like, some things we hate. Some people we love, some people we like to avoid. That's life in the ignorance. But we can't apply those concepts to life in divine life. But life will be there, energy will be there, power will be there, creativity will be there, joy will be there, knowledge will be there. What a wonderful question.
How do you hope to get this message across to people with a physical bent of mind?
I know this is your perpetual question, because you're a born savior. You want to save the world. You want to convince things to other people of things which you're yourself not quite convinced about. This is our ongoing question for years, and Appa understand that desire that everybody should get whatever you get is very noble. It's also a little premature. Let us, the answer to that is not to convince anybody, to find out the truth for ourselves, not just as a mental understanding, but as an experience. What will convince other people is your realization and experience, not your understanding. If it becomes true to us, whether people believe it or not, they will feel that you know something they don't have, and you have something they don't have. They may not say, Appa did not succeed in convincing any of us of everything that he knows to be true. But we definitely know from his experience and his example that there are things that we don't know, and there are areas where we're wrong. And we aspire to get more of what he has than we have. We can be an example for other people. We can radiate knowledge instead of spreading falsehood. Trump's at the other end of the spectrum. He's a disseminating machine for multiplying viruses and falsehood. He actively instigates falsehood wherever he can. Every word is a vibration. We can become vibrations of truth that promote truth in others, rather than bring them deeper down into the pandemic. We can do it by our example. What wonderful questions you